spoken on a couple of occasions. Certainly remember back in October, was it October? No, August. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to Andrew Levy, a former senior British diplomat who worked in Russia. So we thought we'd invite Andrew back. So how are you, Andrew? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm very well. Glad to be on the show.
No, it's a pleasure to have you back because it has been quite the year, hasn't it, in terms of global security and beyond debate that Donald Trump has been the dominant figure internationally. But how have things changed with Donald Trump back in the White House, Andrew?
Looking back before the US election, even last year, the question was, what would a new US president, if Donald Trump won, what view would he take of global security and US national interest? In the past, US presidents, even though they've had somewhat different policies to each other, have focused on, and that's been true over 80 years, controlling the western end of Eurasia, that's us in Europe, and controlling the eastern end of Eurasia, that's East Asia, with Japan and the Philippines and places like that, so that world trade routes and military control can be kept under US influence. That's the US interest. It's worked very well for us in Europe, and certainly in Western Europe and latterly in Central and Eastern Europe, for 80 years. Donald Trump, it seems, is taking a somewhat different view. And he's saying, look, I care about the Western Hemisphere. That basically means the US and South America and I suppose Canada as well. We've heard about, his views of Canada in this year, threats to make it the 51st state or whatever. So this has created a lot of uncertainty in Europe and in the rest of the world. And it's very important in respect of Ukraine, which I imagine we're going to come on to.
Well, yes, I was going to... Actually, let's talk about Ukraine first and then talk about Donald Trump and NATO, because it's all the issue, all the same issue. So in terms of Ukraine, did it leap to say that a return of Donald Trump was exactly what Vladimir Putin was hoping for?
I don't know whether one can say it's exactly what he was hoping for, but the weakening of US support, which is absolutely undoubted, that nobody could deny that the US has effectively removed financial assistance and has made it very difficult to provide, or much more difficult than before, to provide military assistance. But the Europeans are buying US weapons and providing other weapons to Ukraine. That is a great reduction in US support, and that the US position in negotiations over possible peace deals has been, that's perhaps a more controversial point, but I'd say it's clear to many people that it's been fairly heavily slanted towards Russia. Why? One can only speculate, but it looks like there are strong individual interests in the US in doing lucrative business deals with Russia.
Yeah, and you can. Cynics would say, and I've seen some analysis of this, would say that you can see that in the delegation that's been sent to try to find a solution in Ukraine and to find a peace deal, can't you, Andrew?
Certainly. So Steve Witkoff is the name that comes up a lot. This is the real estate developer who is a billionaire, who's been a long-standing friend and golf partner of President Trump. And on the other side, a chap called Kirill Dmitriev, who is head of an investment agency that he's been doing that for quite a few years now. I remember meeting him about 10, 15 years ago. So there's certainly that side to it. On the Russian side, by the way, it's also all about money and power for a very narrow clique of people. The rest of the Russian population don't get a look in. And the Wall Street Journal published an article, was it about a month ago, which set out really rather clearly these sort of business deals that are being attempted behind the scenes.
That was the article I was alluding to, but I was unable to recall too much of it in detail. But I think we both read the same article, and it raised eyebrows, didn't it, around the world there. And Vladimir Putin as well. Is he emboldened? It would seem to be, in terms of his ambition, by Donald Trump's sort of ambiguous attitude towards NATO. Do we actually know what Donald Trump would do if there were an attack on another NATO country, Andrew?
Well, Putin's approach, and indeed the Soviet Union's approach before, but this is particularly true of Putin, has been to try to separate Europe from the USA. Europe and the USA, Western Europe, up until about early 90s. Then there was the fall of the Berlin Wall, 1989, and the end of the Soviet Union shortly after. The Europe and the USA formed this transatlantic alliance. Came into force in 1949, the Atlantic Treaty, the NATO Treaty. And in the NATO Treaty is this famous Article 5, which says that if one member is attacked, others will come to that member's aid. It's not quite saying you go to war, but it's about the strongest guarantee that probably we've ever had in such a treaty. Whether the USA under Donald Trump's leadership would respect Article 5, I think is open to question. Many analysts would say it is. And so to that extent, Putin has achieved an objective of at least partially separating the USA from Europe, which Putin would like to dominate.
Andrew, if we look to 2026, first priority for the White House will be, or one of the first priorities, is to get something settled in Ukraine. Do you think that is close to happening?
I don't think it is. It's always possible that some deal could be agreed to, but the demands being made by Putin are that Ukraine gives up large chunks of territory that the Russians haven't even managed to invade yet. And also, if a deal is made with Putin, there's no real basis for thinking that it will be kept to. We talk about security guarantees, but we mentioned earlier, can NATO rely on America for an Article 5, that's to say, come to aid if attacked, guarantee? And I think a lot of people aren't quite sure about that. Well, could Ukraine rely on any such similar guarantee that involved the USA? Who knows? So I think Ukraine agreeing to anything, Putin agreeing to anything less than maximalist demands seems unlikely. So I'm not sure that a deal is likely to emerge.
And for the Baltic states then, and I was reading in the newspaper again this morning that NATO are looking to shore up that northeastern border, talk of tank traps, defences and things just to slow any potential Russian advance down on the border with Estonia. I mean, is that really where we are and what we're going to be talking about in 2026, Andrew?
We need to prepare for that very quickly. We're well behind the curve in Europe on defence capability. It's not that we don't collectively have a very substantial amount of defence expenditure and defence capability, but it needs to be upgraded. It's got big gaps in it, which many of them have been gaps that have been assigned, if you like, to the USA under the NATO arrangements. Things like heavy lift, being able to move armies very fast to where they're needed. That kind of capability rests with the USA. Nuclear weapons, yes, Britain and France have nuclear weapons, but the overall nuclear deterrent, and for all other NATO countries, is US. If you can't rely on that, it completely changes the strategic calculation. So we need to spend a lot very fast, very effectively to alter our arrangements so that we can defend ourselves without needing to rely on the USA. But it's going to take some years, and in that time, Putin may well exploit any weaknesses that he sees. Why? Because he relies on acquisition of territory or destruction of other people's territory and resources, so denying it to his enemies as he sees them. By the way, he sees the UK as an enemy. He relies on that to stay in power. And therefore, even though he's much damaged and I would say weakened by what he's been doing, he has really nowhere to go but to carry on. If he can be stopped by decisive action, then, he'll have to take the consequences. But otherwise, he will carry on pushing, and the Baltic states may well be a place where he looks.
Feeling that 2026 is going to be not particularly any more positive in terms of security and stability than 2025. But Andrew, I'm grateful to you once again. I've enjoyed your company, enjoyed speaking to you this year, so I look forward to more of the same for next year anyway. That much at least we can look forward to, Andrew.
Well, thank you very much. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Yes, to you as well. Very Merry Christmas. Andrew Levy, former senior British diplomat. Let's go to the line.